In 1925, the hottest investment in America wasn't stocks, it was Florida swampland. People were lining up to buy plots of land they'd never seen, much of it literally underwater. Some parcels changed hands 10 times in a single day, each time at a higher price, without a single brick ever being laid. Fortunes were made on paper overnight, and then, almost as fast as it rose, the whole thing collapsed, wiping out thousands of investors and serving as a chilling preview of the Great Depression that would follow just a few years later. Here's why this 100-year-old story matters right now. In 2026, with home prices stretched, insurance costs exploding in exactly the same Sunbelt states, and a commercial real estate debt wall looming, a lot of people are asking the same uncomfortable question. Are we watching the same movie again? Today I'm breaking down the Great Florida Land Boom, using the lessons from the classic studies of financial manias, and asking honestly whether today's housing market is following the same script, or whether the comparison falls apart under scrutiny. No fear-mongering, no fake certainty, just the pattern, the parallels, and the real differences. Welcome to Earnings Per Page, where I distill the world's best finance history and books into honest breakdowns. Hit subscribe. Let's get in. First, what actually happened in Florida? After World War I, America was booming. Cars became common, highways opened up, and suddenly, a Florida that had been remote and inaccessible became reachable for millions of middle-class Americans. Developers saw an opportunity. They marketed Florida as paradise, sunshine, beaches, an escape from cold northern winters. The migration that followed mirrors something we saw a century later, the post-2020 rush into Sunbelt states like Florida, Texas, and Arizona, as remote work freed people to chase warmth and lower taxes. Lesson 1. The binder boy phenomenon. Here's where it gets wild. In 1925 Florida, you didn't have to actually buy a property to profit. You could put down a small deposit, called a binder, to reserve the right to buy. Then, before you even had to pay the full amount, you'd sell that binder to the next buyer at a markup. Properties were being flipped multiple times before anyone ever owned them outright. The people doing this were nicknamed binder boys. They never intended to own anything. They were trading paper claims on swampland, riding pure momentum. Sound familiar? It's the same psychology behind every speculative flip, from the 2008 housing bubble to crypto to meme stocks. When an asset's price detaches from its actual use and becomes purely about selling to the next buyer at a higher price, you're no longer investing. You're playing musical chairs. Lesson 2. Manufacturing artificial scarcity. Developers in the 1920s were masters of manufactured urgency. They marketed worthless swamp as exclusive waterfront paradise. They created the illusion that land was running out, that you had to buy now double or miss the opportunity forever. The modern echo is real, but more complicated. Today's housing shortage is partly genuine. There's a documented undersupply of housing in the US after years of underbuilding, but it's also amplified by FOMO, by record low inventory creating bidding wars, and by the same psychological message, buy now or be priced out forever. The key difference, and I'll be honest here, today's scarcity is at least partly real. In 1925, the scarcity was almost entirely manufactured. That's an important distinction we'll come back to. Lesson 3. The leverage trap. This is the heart of every bubble. In 1925, buyers were purchasing land with tiny down payments, money they often didn't have, betting they'd flip before payment came due. The credit was loose, the guardrails were gone, and everyone assumed prices would only ever go up. The modern parallel is partial. After 2008, traditional mortgage lending actually got much stricter. That's a genuine protection that didn't exist in the 1920s, but leverage has crept back in through other doors. Private equity firms buying up single-family homes, creative financing schemes, and especially the commercial real estate sector, which is heavily leveraged and facing a wall of debt that needs refinancing at much higher interest rates. The danger in 2026 isn't primarily the residential mortgage like in 2008, it's commercial real estate and the institutions exposed to it. Lesson 4. The external shock. Here's the part everyone forgets. The Florida land boom was already wobbling in early 1926. Then, in September 1926, a massive hurricane struck Miami directly. It killed hundreds, destroyed thousands of buildings, and shattered the paradise illusion overnight. The capital stopped flowing. The binders became worthless. The boom was over. The chilling modern parallel? Climate risk. The same Sunbelt states driving today's housing demand are facing skyrocketing insurance premiums, and in some areas, insurers are pulling out entirely. In parts of Florida, Louisiana, and California, you increasingly can't get affordable insurance at all. If insurance becomes unavailable or unaffordable in a major market, it could function as exactly the kind of external shock that the 1926 hurricane was. A sudden reality check that punctures inflated values. Now, the greater fool theory. Every bubble runs on what economists call the greater fool theory. You knowingly overpay for something, betting a greater fool will pay even more. It works, until you become the last buyer and there's no greater fool left. The 1925 binder boys learned this brutally. When buyers stopped showing up, the music stopped, and whoever was holding the paper lost everything. Now, the honest verdict. Are we repeating 1925? Here's my real take, and it's more nuanced than the doomers or the cheerleaders will tell you. The psychological parallels are striking. FOMO, speculation, manufactured urgency, leverage creeping back, and over-concentration in climate, risky Sunbelt regions. These are all real and worth taking seriously, but the structural differences matter enormously. First, today's housing shortage is partly genuine, not purely manufactured like the swampland. Real demand provides a floor that 1925 never had. Second, residential lending standards are dramatically tighter than both 1925 and 2008. The reckless residential leverage isn't there the same way. Third, the real fragility in 2026 is concentrated in commercial real estate and insurance markets, not in the typical homeowner's mortgage. So is a crash inevitable? No. Anyone who tells you a crash is guaranteed is selling certainty that doesn't exist. But are there genuine warning signs that rhyme with 1925? Absolutely. The honest position is somewhere in the middle. Elevated risk, real vulnerabilities, but not a foregone collapse. What to actually watch? Here's your checklist. 1. Insurance availability in your market. If insurers are fleeing, that's a serious red flag. 2. The gap between local home prices and local incomes. When prices detach completely from what people can actually afford, that's unsustainable. 3. Commercial real estate debt defaults. This is the most likely trigger point for stress in 2026. 4. Whether buyers in your area are purchasing to live or purely to speculate and flip. Speculation-dominated markets are the most fragile. Final thoughts. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. The Florida land boom of 1925 is one of the clearest examples in history of how human psychology turns shelter into a speculative casino, and what happens when the music stops. The smartest financial response to all this isn't panic and isn't denial, it's awareness. Understand the pattern. Watch the warning signs. Don't overextend yourself on leverage you can't survive. Don't buy purely because you're afraid of missing out, and never assume prices only go up. The binder boys of 1925 made that exact assumption, and it cost them everything. If this gave you a useful lens on today's market, subscribe to Earnings Per Page. Next week, I'm breaking down a book on how to actually invest in real estate the boring, durable, value-based way, the opposite of speculation. Drop a comment with whether you think your local housing market is in a bubble. See you in the next one.